Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the West Virginia Clinical and Translational Science Institute Research Boot Camp for April. We are so pleased to welcome our speaker today, Dr. Pravin Chaturvedi, to Morgantown. He's spending almost a full work week with us this week because he participated in the West Virginia Biosciences Summit as well. And that was a wonderful event, and his talk was excellent, so I'm excited for you all to hear it today. So let me give you a little bit of background. Most importantly, he is an alumnus of the Pharmaceutical Sciences PhD program here at West Virginia University, so he does come back annually and advises in the health sciences on research and beyond on research initiatives. He received his bachelor's in pharmacy from the University of Bombay. Over his 25-plus year career, Dr. Chaturvedi has participated or led the discovery and or development activities for several new chemical entities, culminating in the successful development and commercialization of 7 new drugs that are currently marketed by various companies. He began his R&D career in the product development group at Park Davis Warner Lambert Company, which is now Pfizer, was then in the preclinical group at Alkermes, and was head of lead evaluation at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. So to here today, Dr. Chaturvedi is the founder and chairman of Boston-based IndUS Pharmaceuticals and a co-founder of Florida-based Oceanyx Pharmaceuticals. He also serves as the CEO of both of these organizations. He remains the chief scientific officer of San Francisco-based Napo Pharmaceuticals, and previously served as president and CEO of Boston-based Scion Pharmaceuticals. And I really could go on, but you guys aren't here to listen to me, you're here to listen to him. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Chaturvedi.
Good afternoon, everybody. If you guys can hear me in the back, Tom, you can hear me? Good, good. All right. Thank you very much, Julie, for inviting me, and to all of the West Virginia Health Sciences Center for accommodating my entropic, chaotic disruption in their lives. So that's what I do. I go and disrupt things, okay? So I'm here today to first disrupt all of your seating arrangements. All of you in the last 3 benches, move up. But that was a test. You were listening. Thank you. The bold, the undaunted. Good, good, good. Excellent. Very good. And the reason I did that is that most people, when they know I'm speaking, they like to come for the last 2 minutes so that they can avoid the entire talk and still tell me I was there. So they need the spaces at the end, you know. So you guys are bold enough to come right at the beginning. Julie introduced me, and as she mentioned, I'm an alum of this very building, actually, this very corner of this building, and it's always a pleasure for me to come back. I usually start out by talking about entrepreneurship and innovation and how that all ties in. And before I do that, I usually point out that all that you heard from Julie is all true, but effectively it translates into I'm professionally unemployed for the last 15 years because I cannot hold on to a job, okay? So I have attention deficit disorder, clearly diagnosed by myself, and I act on it, okay? So I think that's what you got to remember. So Julie asked me to say, okay, we have to come here and talk about funding the dream. And so, there goes your recording. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me? Sorry. My apologies, Julie. I'm going to put it in my pocket so it doesn't fall. Still okay? Yeah, all right. So we're talking about funding the dream. And funding the dream, I'm going to, for the next 35, 40 minutes, make it analogous to making a movie, okay? All of you can relate to making movies, watching movies, home movies. And so what you'll hear is, how do we do that? But before we do that, you should always think about enterprise value. What constitutes an enterprise? 4 things make an enterprise, okay? So it's your hand, okay? You need a good idea, which is your index finger. More than the idea, you need a team. Okay, that's the most important. You need a team. Less important than the team, but more important than the idea, is a good group of mentors, board, and scientific advisors. So they can help you through that. And then you need a little bit of cash. Okay? Cash is always last. If you have the first 3, you always find the cash. Okay? There'll always be capital starvation. That's a good thing because money always attracts the wrong kind of people. Okay? You put in a pot of money, it'll disappear on you really fast. But you have to practice as you build a company. You learn to eat what you can hunt. And that's the concept of capital starvation. You basically work through that. I think we lost that. So we don't have the slides, so sorry about that. So while Julie fixes that, that's the concept of capital starvation. So those are the 4 ground rules. We'll think about that, and we'll talk about how we go about funding the dream is intended to basically fund an enterprise. Okay, are we okay with that now? Okay. So let's start with a screenplay. So when you actually put a movie together, for those of you who are not familiar with how to make a movie, you basically many times will take a book and you'll say, you know what, I can make a movie out of that. But if you made a movie based on the book, it'd be lousy. What makes it a good movie is the screenplay. So you got to write a screenplay for that. So for instance, Peter Jackson, many years ago, went and told New Line Cinema, I'm going to translate J.R. Tolkien's book, both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and make that into trilogies. You have to give me $300 million, because Nancy and I, his wife and he, could basically write the screenplay for it. And then they knew who to cast, how to do all that, and we'll talk about that. Okay? They sold the vision as well as the value proposition. That a $300 million investment was going to get them more than $3 billion in return. And they sold that. Okay? So you have to have a screenplay, and those of you who have not read J.R. Tolkien, he is certifiably crazy. Okay? So if you can read that book, you guys are better people than I am. Okay? Because I can't follow that book. Right? So thank God Nancy and Peter Jackson wrote the screenplay. So in the screenplay, you almost must think about who are the players, who are the producers, which will be the investors, what's the plot. Significance and impact is very important. You're going to have many mishaps. We're going to talk about that. How do you navigate through that? You know, your endings, is it happy or tragic? And then finally, the value, which is the return on the price of the admission to watch the movie. Every time you spend $12 or $18 with your 3D glasses, you come out and say, well, that was a waste of our money. Well, that's what you talk about, you know. So you don't want the investors saying that was a waste of our money. So, so let's start with a cast. Casting is very important in any movie. It's also very important because that defines your team when you build an enterprise. So first thing you as an entrepreneur have to define, what kind of an entrepreneur are you? There are 2 types of entrepreneurs in the world. One who seek impact, and one who want to extract profits from an existing opportunity. They are both guaranteed entrepreneurs, but they have different value propositions. Okay? You must also think about why you. So in a movie, if they cast George Clooney, why didn't they cast Harrison Ford? There has to be a reason. It's not because Harrison Ford wanted more money. You know, they would have gone and reached out to him for a different reason. So you have to define why you. Okay? What gives you the competitive edge? Why would you want to start that company? Why would you do that? Most importantly, why are you doing this? Is it going to have significant impact? Or are you doing it for personal glory and gain? If you're doing it for the last line on that slide, do not do it. Because you'll make a lot of people unhappy. Okay? You do it for that reason, social and economic impact. So if you have impact, you'll have both benefits, social as well as economic. Who are your co-founders? In your casting crew, there's always a supporting cast. They're just as important as your lead role, male and female, right? It's good to have 1 to 2 co-founders. Single founder companies frighten us, okay? Because it's just one voice talking. And they talk to themselves in the mirror doesn't talk back, okay? So you got to worry about that. You have to think about the management team members. You got to think about people that are complementary to you, who have skills other than your skills. This is very hard for scientific entrepreneurs in particular, because they basically go in and they try to find people that are exactly like them, because they want basically handmaidens or people that will understand it. That's not what you do. You basically want to have complementary people. You need your mentors. You have to think about who are going to be your advisors and board members, and why should they be your advisors and board members. They shouldn't be your friend who goes and drinks Starbucks coffee with you, but it could be that for the right reasons, okay? And who will be your executive management? Academic founders, ladies and gentlemen, make lousy executives. So it's important for them to respect that and say, we are good at academic research, scholarship, innovation. We are not good at translating that to a product. So we need different people to do that. It's a different skill set. It's a different team. So one has to respect that and acknowledge that and say, that's what we're going to do. We're going to find an executive team. So then you have to find the producers, and the producers are also the misfits. And they're the misfits because you can't make a movie without a producer, because the producer is going to bankroll the whole thing. And when they're going to bankroll, you're going to ask people for $1 or $100 million. They're going to put you through the ringer, through the grinder, because they're going to ensure that their money is well spent, right? So, but before we do that, we'll talk about a couple of myths that we have to disband right at the beginning. First myth, that everybody has that in their mind: the output of any venture is equivalent to the size of the input funds. Bullshit. Doesn't work. Excuse me, I'm being taped, I know. Okay. You can edit that. You know. Anyway, I speak like I think, or how I feel, actually. So what's more successful? The successful businesses have disproportionate return on their investment. And I'll just put that in simple terms for you. If I give you $1 for your business this year, if you return $2 to me next year, you've only returned my capital, because that's how much I'd have got if I just invested in the market. In third year, it has to be $4. The fourth year, it has to be $8. That's return on capital. So unless you have a disproportionate return, more than sixfold, you have not built an enterprise. So $1 invested should return at least $6 or more dollars. Single-digit returns don't interest us. We're looking for big double-digit or triple-digit returns. $1 invested, 20, 30, 100x returns. That's what we look for in 3 to 7 year time frame. Okay? The key driver for disproportionate return on investment is innovation. Everybody talks about innovation. It means different things to different people. Innovation really is something that is absolutely unique in every sense of the word. Okay? Its innovation has to have 3 components to it. It has to be novel. It has to be inventive. And most importantly, it has to be useful. So you better answer all 3 components of that when you say, I have innovated something. It's not just the invention itself. It's not just the novelty of it. It's the usefulness that defines the value for it. So one should always think about that. Second myth that exists, and all my big pharma colleagues always get offended by this, but I will tell you this. Large corporations are better suited for innovation compared to small entities. No, they are not. They are terrible at innovation, because large companies are good at optimizing the routine. They can perfect a process. They can scale it. They cannot innovate. Smaller entities innovate because they cannot have a routine, because they don't have the money. So they basically have to innovate. You can only innovate. Necessity is the mother of invention, okay? So you create that necessity in a small company because you do not have the luxury of making payroll. Every 2 weeks, when the ADP payroll comes to my little BlackBerry, I check that they didn't make any mistakes, because if they made a mistake, I won't have payroll 2 weeks from that, right? And the law requires us to do only one thing, make payroll. I can fire and hire you at will, but if I hired you, I got to pay you some way. Now, what is the importance of these producers, who are the misfits and the naysayers, in the ecosystem of building an enterprise? Well, the first thing is they'll provide a supportive or a contrarian view. New Line Cinema agreed with Peter Jackson. Their J.R. Tolkien's book was terrible to read, but would make good movie. So they gave him the money, right? So they were able to tune into what Peter and Nancy Jackson were presenting to them. Okay? Good entrepreneurs are excellent listeners. So they also knew that they had the money, but now they have to think about how to deliver on all those fronts in a time frame. That money was given for 1 year, and the first of the trilogy had to come out in the first year. For those of you who don't know how he made that movie, he shot all movies at all parts, at all random numbers. And the genius was in the editing of that, because half the movie was shot on computer. Lord of the Rings. That's right. Entrepreneurs also are not flattered or upset by praise or criticism. They are very even keel, because as I teach all my teams, there are no good days or bad days. They are just days. Tomorrow is another day. Today bad things happen. Tomorrow good things will happen. So you got to just be very even keel. When good things happen, you go out. I always have wine anyway. I have a little extra, you know. And we are able to incorporate the raw feedback into our venture. That does not mean we change our business plan all the time, but we get raw feedback. You know, if I come and sell you something, and you say, I don't want to buy it, then I should not walk away. I should say, why don't you want to buy it? You know, tell me. And you'll have a reason. You know, some of it may be, I don't have the money. Then I'll say, you don't have the money now, but you might have the money next year. So would you like to stay in touch? So you have that dialogue. That feedback is very important. So that brings us to who are your investors. Think really hard about the investors. You have to have independent funding sources, and we'll talk about which ones they are. But before that, you also have to find out who are your customers, paying customers. So I was talking to some of the graduate students just now, and a graduate student asked me to really define what I was talking about in terms of what do I mean by the words relevance, value, and impact, because I use them a lot. And it was a very good question, because it's second nature to me, but I didn't recognize that it was not so clear to you guys. So I explained to them, relevance is to the customer. If you build something, it has to be relevant to the customer. Value is the inherent potential of what you're building, the product or the service. So you have to assign some value to it. It doesn't have a price yet, but it has the value is the potential of that enterprise. That's called value. And impact is the benefit to the customer, to society, to the economics, to the investors. So you have to think of all three terms. You have to make it relevant to the customer, it has to be valuable, and it has to produce benefit. Positive benefit, not negative. Okay. Now, you have to think about who are going to be your early customers, who are going to be your late customers. Because if you have one customer, that one customer is guaranteed to die in a few years. That's business not worth building, because it won't scale. There'll be no buyers at the other end, right? So you got to think about a market and customers that are actually going to grow. If you're supported by government funds, they'll give you the initial money to create the value proposition. And you got to understand that investors do not invest in creating the value proposition. Value proposition, for those of you who don't know what that means, is when Peter Jackson walked in and said, here's Tolkien's book, I'm going to make this into a movie. And I can sell X hundred books of these, but if I make this into a movie, it'll be this many billions. There was a value proposition to the screenplay. They were going to take a book and write a screenplay and make it into a movie. That's a value proposition. It's very simply defined. So that's how you got to think about it. So state and federal and SBIR grants and NIH grants, they're great to create the value proposition so that you can tantalize the investors with the possibilities. Remember, the market buys the potential, never reality. Ever follow the stock market? They speculate till the results come out. The day the results come out, stock drops, okay? So if a company announces they're going to announce the results tomorrow, the day before you should sell all the stock, or at least some portion of it, because reality always bites. It's always less than the potential. And you have to think about the timing and the size of the funding. So the movie cost overall was $300 million. And they presented the whole cost, but they didn't take all the money at once. They took it as they built the company. So they were meeting the milestones. It's good to do that because it allowed them to have the discipline to basically execute. What are your future sources of funding? Being victims of your success is a high-class problem on many levels. When you have succeeded, you need more money because now you're translating an idea, you've reduced it to practice, you've made it into a product, and now you need scale because there's a demand you have created. These are 3 different investment buckets. You need about, for a start stage company, you'll need anywhere from $1 to $5 million. As you've reduced it to practice and you have a product and you have to do trials with it, you'll need somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $30 million. Then you've done the clinical trials and you've shown the value that you thought it would be. Now you have to scale it. Now you need $100 million. Okay? You don't walk into the company and say, I want $125 million and I can make this happen. They will ask you to have some coffee with them, okay? And they'll ask you to pay for it. Okay? So never ask, always know how to ask, what to ask, when to ask. It's very important, okay? So that should be recognized by you and your team early on. Okay, let's talk about the type of financiers available. Friends and family, guaranteed to lose friends and family. Don't take their money, okay? Because that's a bad idea, okay? Because the money they're going to take, they're going to expect obligations, favors, and they want money returned, right? And there's never enough fun anywhere unless you're J. Rockefeller, in which case you're building the Neuroscience Institute across the hall. Angels and demons. Demons are the VCs, angels, you know, us, small guys, you know. But we are the 2 sides of the same coin. What's valuable about independent financing from angels and VCs, demons, is they give you due diligence. They are critical evaluators. They are able to evaluate the value proposition and really help you develop that and deliver that. The government programs, you'll get some funding from SBIR grants. The most you can get is $1.3 million if you're lucky. Their funding rates are about the same as NIH R01 funding, so it's not really much better than that. There's not enough capital anyway, so you'll get $300,000 in first tranche and then you're eligible for another $1 million later. If you take money from state and federal or agencies to build your enterprise, the reason it's perilous is they have an expectation of how many jobs you're going to create. You better be very clear about that because life sciences, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the last remaining enterprises where high-paying jobs are created. But because all of you are PhDs and MD PhDs, they are also not voluminous. It's not a machine line, right? You're not making assembly cars. So one of you hired is not hiring 3 other people because your brain is basically going to translate technology. It's a 3-for-1 buy that we get. So you'll get more money, but you won't hire that many people. State and government agencies oftentimes are looking for how many jobs you're going to create. So you better be talking about that. Strategic partners are very valuable because they are your customers and they are your future buyers of your product and or your enterprise. So spend early time thinking about what you're making, who's your customer. Spend time piloting. Now, fancy books have come out, lean startup, this, that. It's all the same concept. It's all tried and true economics. Create demand and supply, okay? So if there is no demand, having a lot of supply is no use. There's a lot of demand and having no supply, that's bad. That's very bad, okay? So try to address both. The angels and VCs, they do enormous due diligence. And what kind of due diligence do they do? They'll review your business plan, your financials. They'll look at all of the budgets critically. We are very good with numbers, ladies and gentlemen. We are very good. By the time you've done any number, we've already processed it, and we've already calculated what our return is going to be. So think hard as we present. Okay? Think about your competitive advantages. If it's a crowded field, think about your differentiation. If it's a desert, think about the reasons why it's a desert. Okay? Being in a desert is not always good. Okay? So you have to think about that. They will conduct reference checks on key personnel, on the founders, on the board of advisors, on the team. Make sure you're not, serial murderer or something. They'll make sure of that. They'll test the market conditions for need and sustainability. Today's need may not exist 3 years from now. Let's take an example. All you millennials, how many of you are wearing a watch? All non-millennials, how many of you are wearing a watch? So, is a watch obsolete, or you guys have moved on? You've moved on because you have your little thing you play on all the time. And on that it says, oh, I'm late for my class. I'll go there now. Okay? All right? So that's what you have to think about, the need and sustainability. Okay? And they will do competitive landscape and positioning analysis for you. The other thing investors are good at is we know other investors. So when we invest our money, that shows that the enterprise value was supportable. Not proven, but supportable. So when we put in our money and some progress is made, we will go and find additional investors to buttress that money. Because we'll say, okay, the team has made progress. Yes, we had hiccups here, hiccups there, but we made it. And that's what the investors will do. They'll also syndicate. You get one of them, you'll get 3 of them. Okay? So that's our advantage. So you go through one, we like to mooch off other people's due diligence. So if somebody's already done the due diligence and has invested, we'll say, oh, we'd like to be in that deal. And then there's a melee at the door, but that's good. They'll recruit good board and management team members for you because we have so many companies we know about and we know the overlaps. So we'll basically find people for you. Young, old, senior, otherwise. Okay? Most importantly, they'll ensure discipline on execution. Because when I give you $1, I'll be watching. Right? Because it's not, if I'm giving charity, I want a tax deduction, but I'm not giving charity. I'm taking equity in your company, right? So that's what we do. What does the government do? There's a role for the government in funding the dream? Yeah, there is. They should pass good laws, the right laws, okay? For those of you who don't know, because you were not born before 1980, there was a landmark act passed by the Congress called the Bayh-Dole Act. The Bayh-Dole Act allowed universities to commercialize their technology that was developed on NIH dollars. You could not do that before. That was landmark passage of that law because it allowed us to take some of these innovations, these discoveries that are otherwise useless because it has not helped anybody and make products out of that. We could not do that before that. They developed some good tax incentives, capital gains, some of the other stuff that the states and the federal agencies allow you. So when we invest our money, we are taxed at a different rate, especially if we invest for a long time. And they have to create these accelerators, incubators, training centers. The government can do that, where they can put, like if you were my team, and I don't know any of you except maybe a few, I can build an enterprise with just everybody in this room. And 3 years from now, we'll be successful. Not knowing any of your backgrounds, I can do that. Because that is my strength. Okay? Because you can take intelligent people, put them together, and they will solve real problems. Thing is, I have to show you the way, where we're going. That's it. I have to sell you a vision. This is what we want to do. So where I live, near Boston, I have tons of people like you. So I am a kid in a candy store, right? I can pick what do we want to do, and that's what we do, okay? Let's talk about the most important thing, the plot. Must have a story, right? You're making a movie. Somebody has to cry, somebody has to laugh, somebody has to get punched. You know, that's a plot. You got to have a significance to it, right? So, must have clear and significant impact. Think really hard. Now, we talked about 3 things, right? We talked about the impact, the value, and relevance right at the beginning. Must have clear impact, must have clear benefit. It can be incremental or it can be enabling. But you have to think about what is it that you're going to create an impact in. So if you're going to make a better diagnostic, that's actionable. That is an impact because you have now improved the tools to make a correct assessment. Otherwise, we are doing it off of blunt instruments. So you have to think about that and think about really how it is helping us to move something forward. It has to be differentiated. You cannot do the same thing as somebody else is doing. Google and Yahoo are not the same. Facebook and Twitter are not the same. But they're in the same space, right? But they're doing different things. So you have to really think about how you differentiate that. And therefore, it should be a self-evident value proposition, which is answered by, ladies and gentlemen, what is new besides being new? All of you do research. And I'll ask you, what is the significance? What's new? And you'll tell me, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm like, okay, I've heard that. What's new besides that? Why you and why are you doing that? That's the self-evident value proposition, okay? And then eventually, because of technology and disruption and scale, you bring down the cost. Society benefits, okay? Human Genome Project, when it was first solved in 1999, 2000, I think it was more than $1 million per human genome. It's less than $500 or $300 now. And it's only going to keep going down. That's what technology does, okay? So your venture is not a Me Too plot. You know, if it's a Me Too plot, it better be well differentiated or why it's a Me Too plot. You have to do the right thing. Entrepreneurs are leaders. There's a definition that I always follow. Managers do things right. You can hire managers and tell them this is what you have to do. They will do things right. But leaders do the right things. They will say, we have to go into civil war to preserve the union, knowing fully that brothers will fight brothers and kill each other. But the value proposition is preservation of the union. That's a leader. Right there on his horse with them. So that's what entrepreneurs are leaders, because they've taken a leadership position. And entrepreneurship, ladies and gentlemen, is an irrational act. If you think about it, you will not do it, because it will make absolutely no sense why you should do it. It's like, why do we have to go into civil war? Why can't we all work together, kiss and hug each other, right? Others tried that. Lincoln had to take it into war. You must identify the market segment that you're going into, which is society, where you're going in, and you must provide that cost effectively. If I'm going to come and sell you an iPhone that costs $5,000, it better be a super iPhone, man, because otherwise it's not worth it, right? So you got to think about that. You got to think about why I'm going to make it and what's the value. And overall, it improves quality of society. We are in the knowledge economy, ladies and gentlemen. We have moved past natural resource economy. I know there's shale gas and oil and stuff going on, and that's perishable. This innovation and knowledge economy is what's going to sustain us. You, ladies and gentlemen, are that group. So be sure, recognize your place in society. You are the leaders. You are. Whether you like it or not, you're the leaders. So you're fulfilling a need that is underserved or unmet. Now, as you go into this, you have the plot, you have the cast, you have the director, you have the producer, you have the money. Now bad things will happen. Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will go wrong. Pioneering ventures are always risky, right? As I once heard someone say, you can recognize the pioneers. They are the ones with arrows in their back, right? That's who the pioneers are, because they're taking the first step, because you're going somewhere where no man has gone before, right? So that's what you're doing. There is no blueprint, there's no handbook, it's evolutionary. You kind of come and do it every day, and you discover new things. You must know when to course correct. So iceberg, you better course correct instead of saying, we'll just go past it, right? Because you can't ship it, right? So you got to recognize when it's a vital sign. And all of you in the field of medicine, you know the vital signs: blood pressure, temperature, pain. Those are vital signs. This thing is just like a vital sign. You must have a collective wisdom to know when to stay the course and when to change the course. And that's why a team is valuable, because you can sit at a table and decide. Because the hardest thing to play chicken is knowing when to flinch. That's what you have to do. So what are the symptoms of trouble? So as I told you, when I give you my dollar, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to watch you, right? So symptoms of trouble are market problems. My business development guy only comes and yells at the technology guy every day. You're not making the right product. The market's not buying. Your fault. You built a bad technology. No, my fault for investing in it. Because that means it's a non-compelling value proposition if you can't find customers. Because even a bad product will be adopted. Because an early prototype will be adopted if there is a need, okay? So think about that. Business model failure, very important reason for most companies to fail. You know why? Cost of customer acquisition exceeds the sales dollars. If I have to spend $1 million to find a customer who's going to give me $100,000 in revenue, that's a non-sustainable business model. If you're spending $100,000 to get a customer that starts getting you $1 million, $3 million, and there's growth, that's a sustainable business model. So the business model is very important. Poor management team, cardinal rule for failure of most companies. You hire bureaucrats, you hire empire builders, the company will die. Because they cannot execute, they cannot do anything right, okay? And many times leaders that are the leaders in the proverbial way we use the word, they will hire people that are yes people because they want to maintain their clout. That's a bad thing for the business. You want to have people that disagree with you but work for the enterprise. So you have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization. Inadequate funds. We normally will fund you. If you ask for $3 million, we'll do the budget. We might say that you really can get there with $2.7 million. And then we'll probably give you $2 million. And we'll hold the other $700,000 just to see if you got there with $2 million, how far. Chances are you'll come out ahead. If I gave you $4 million, you'd squander that and ask for more, okay? Because we would have done that math. And so disciplined cash management is very important. And the product problems are the technical problems. Sometimes you make a product that just sucks, okay? It was a good idea, a bad product. You close shop and say, we gave it a college try, it didn't work. So you have to navigate through that. You have to execute through adversity. And you must always recognize when is it adversity and when is it a flawed strategy. And that's why boards are so important. Boards can recognize the strategy problems. Teams can recognize adversity, okay? So you have to think about tactical challenges and say, okay, I need to fix this or I have to do that. That's a tactical shift. So you think about military terms. There's a goal, there's a strategy, there's a tactic, and then there's implementation. So if you follow the Marines, they always want to know what's the mission, okay? And then they'll basically have a strategy with 3 to 6 people team. That's it. And they have the 70% rule, right? They basically say we'll only target 70% of our goal because the rest of it they don't know. They plan for contingencies. So in business, it's just like being in the Marines, okay? So experienced management team, which is the leadership, is very important because they can have the domain expertise and the knowledge and the wisdom to know when it is right to not shift and when it is right to shift. They will help you do that. And that'll allow you to basically course correct because at the end of the day, the guy in the engine room still has to turn the steering wheel. The guy on the deck is still just giving orders, right? So you have to correct that flawed strategy early if you think it's a flawed strategy and try to get a customer right away in a pilot deal as early as possible. Because when you get a customer, you have validation. Somebody thinks it's useful. Somebody else thinks it's worthwhile. Definition of an enterprise is somebody else finds it worthwhile that is not related to you, okay? So, key attributes for success. You know, we always talk about what are the key attributes. We are such a metricized society. Everything is key attributes. What's your SAT score? What's your MCAT score? Why did you do that, right? Let's talk about that. Well-articulated vision has to be on top. And monetizability from customers is very important. But when you have a vision, the monetizability is the second part of that. A knowledgeable team that is executing with speed. Most precious commodity, ladies and gentlemen, is time. Never comes back. So respect time, okay? Disciplined execution with budget. You must have excellent social and networking skills. So like the night before, last night too, I was drinking till 2, okay? So my wine, okay? But I talked to a lot of people. I got to know a lot about them. You must have excellent social and networking skills. You cannot look at the business card and say, oh, I should talk to this guy. He's perhaps important. That's not networking. And the guy will be pissed, okay? So talk about that. You must have a positive work ethic. You must be self-motivated. You should wake up every morning, got to make the donuts. Get up, got to make the donuts, okay? It has to be strong determination with a can-do attitude. You have to have a can-do attitude. You guys are motivated already. You're getting your PhDs, MD PhDs. I don't know any more motivation than that, you know? So you're going to do that. And you have to be willing to adapt to changes. Because life happens, right? Life happens every day. Bad things happen. 9/11 happened. I was in a venture meeting. And my venture capitalist is looking at the TV screen, and I was trying to distract him and say, look at my business plan, look at my business plan. He said, man, I got to get to Belgium, man. You know, that's, you can't do anything about it. That's force majeure, right? So you can't do that. You must be quick in your decision making. You must take informed risks. I take risks, but I don't bungee jump, okay? Because I don't like to just, you know, subject my body to cruel punishments, unusual and cruel punishments, okay? But I take risks. I start companies. 99% of them are guaranteed to fail. But I still start them because you make progress. When you try, you make progress. So you should do that. 98% of success comes from execution. Must execute with discipline every day. It's like your thesis work. You try the experiments, you got to write it, you got to observe, change, analyze, talk to your mentors, colleagues, do that, okay? That will define, if you have the key success factors, it will define whether your ending is going to be happy or tragic. So it's a movie we're making, remember? We can have a happy ending or a tragic ending. What are those, okay? There are some businesses that are structured by entrepreneurs to pay themselves as they go. That's a mom and pop store, right? That's a restaurant or something where it's not a scalable business. It's basically an enterprise, but it's sort of 2%, 3% enterprise. You're not building, basically. It's a minimal amount of capital needed, basically, and then you build something and you're starting to sell your wares. When you simply liquidate your business, clearance sale, come buy Persian rugs, 79% off, that's a bad exit for the investors, okay? Because you bought the Persian rugs at 100% of the cost, okay? So if you sell the company to a friend or a family member, that's also a bad exit for the investors because that retains proxy control by the family and the founders. We don't like that because they're not interested in returning our investment. They are more interested in maintaining control and their domain. Strategic acquisition, on the other hand, by a competitor or a partner, we like that because they come in and they said, Rich, Val, Tara, you built something, we like it. Let's not talk about the price. The fact that they want to buy what they built is validation in itself, okay? So that is very important to investors. We worry about the price and we fight about that afterwards. First we celebrate, hey, somebody else is interested, okay? And we do IPOs. All of you know what a word IPO means, initial public offering. It's very hard to get an IPO done. It's very complicated, it's very rigorous. You go on road shows, 6 months, you basically are selling the company, you're not running the business. So you better have damn good people and managers at home conducting day-to-day business if you're going to run an IPO. because you can't stop, because time is passing you by. You still got to make payroll and rent. So the right ending is defined by us, right? So when we have realization of the venture in revenue, the return, that's what we want. We always calculate. You guys all hear the ROI term. What's return on investment? That's the ending defines it. Not the beginning, the ending. Okay? So if you have an IPO or an M&A, that's a happy ending for the investors. We are laughing. We're very happy. Okay? If you have a liquidation or a fire sale, it's a tragic ending. We're crying. You're crying too with us because you haven't made anything either. Okay? So just think about that the end matters. Always begin with the end. Just remember that. This is what you want to do. So that's the value. We talked about the last point, which is value. It's a return on the price of admission, the ticket. What defines value are the market, number one. Number two is the product differentiation, which is defined by your uniqueness, your IP, your management capabilities. Number three, how good is the team? Sustainability is very important. As I said, if you have one customer who's guaranteed to die, you don't have customers 3 years from now, that's a bad business. And the exit value. So if you started a company and your company was valued at $2 million, let's say, give or take, and then when you sold it, it was valued at $250 million, or when you did the IPO, it was at $250 million. That's the exit value that defines the value proposition. That's the return on investment. That's the value. So as Oscar Wilde said, we are not critics. The investors are not critics. We do not know the price of everything, but we do know the value of some things. So that's what we do. So we put that thing together. And therefore, when you do that and you have the right ending, you've made a successful movie or a successful enterprise, whatever your poison is. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Questions? Or you can leave. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All of you hear the question? George is asking, how do I manage my time? Well, I manage it because I hire people that are very good at doing what they do, so I don't perseverate about things that they're doing. So the first thing I do is I really spend a lot of time evaluating people. So when you're not watching, I'm watching. When you're not speaking, I'm analyzing, okay? So I spend a lot of time in people's habits, right? So what that does is I recruit people for only two things, their heart and their minds, not their skills. Because our hands will do what the heart and the mind desire. So I spend a lot of time spending time with people, talking to them, asking them questions, learning from them. And that builds confidence. It's a confidence building measure. So my time management, 80% of my time is spent with people at all ranks, from board to the intern. I talk to all of them because everybody should know what we're doing. So that's what I do. The second thing I do is I'm completely dissatisfied. As I said at the beginning, I have ADD. So I cannot do one thing all the time. So I basically have to get new ideas. I have to get people telling me they're doing this or that, and I am listening and I'm processing it and I'm asking questions. Why are you doing it? What's the relevance? So I spend that time looking at value creation opportunities. And then what I do is luckily for me, I need about between 4 and 5 hours of sleep at the most. So I'm still a vegetarian. I still drink a lot of wine, as some friends know. But even when I'm doing that, I'm actually networking and talking to people. So what happens is it's kind of a fun management of my time because my time multiplies, right? Knowledge is the only commodity that multiplies when shared. Everything else diminishes, right? So what I do is I get a group of people and I talk to them. And I can go and read every one of their papers. I will learn less reading all their papers than from talking to them for an hour. So I find focus groups, I find team members, I bring them together and I say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I understand you just published something recently. Tell me about it. And then I get the inner workings, not the edited version of yesterday's news that got published in some journal. Those things don't impress us. So I probably do not spend as much time as you might think reading articles or patent applications. I spend that much time talking to the innovators and the teams that are sort of trying to do something new. So I spend my time that way. So on an average basis, I am awake for about 20 hours. I drink for about 3. I sleep for about 4 or 5. And then the remaining 12 hours, I probably spend 8 to 10 hours talking to people. And the remaining time, I answer all my emails, and I read whatever I have to read, make pitch decks. I'm very efficient about that part because whatever pitch deck you think is perfect, there's only one truth to that. It is not. Okay? So put your ideas and tell a story. If you can tell a story without slides, even better. Okay? So people want to have a conversation. They do not want another pedagogic or a didactic lecture from you. We make the mistake of doing that. Does that answer, George? Yes, sir. Thank you, Paul.
So I think one of the things that kind of hit me when you talked about this, to do this because we want to make an impact.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, scientists, that's why we're in the business, right?
Yep.
We want to make an impact. But what we don't do so good is to look at it as a technology or innovation in something itself.
Yeah.
Right? We're here to make impact. And how do you change that prism or culture when we look at things and say, we talk about some money instead of,
Yeah.
hey, this is just global Bitcoin economy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so let's take the last sentence first, right? If it's going to do global good and the timing of that is too long, that's still a value proposition that we'd want to incubate. So in other words, we'd encourage you to say, Paul, this is definitely worth following up. Don't give up on this. It'll be hard times because, as I said, we don't invest in creating the value proposition. That's created by the innovator. So we basically support that. I think where we analyze things differently is like one of the students today when I was having lunch with them asked, what do you think about next generation sequencing and how you're going to incorporate that in your clinical practice? And I told them that it's not actionable. And it's not actionable because I have to act today. So it is on a value chain of clinical management. It is another data point. Right? You need many other things to buttress that. In the meantime, you on the floor who's taking care of a patient has to do something right then. So you're going to make decisions either on a holistic approach, which will be on physical examination and blood pressure and stuff like that, or you're going to say, okay, this is what the X-ray shows if you only have an X-ray, or if you have an MRI, you'll act on it because that's actionable. And so today, if you do full exome sequencing of my sample or my, and you'll give me the results in 21 days or a year, doesn't really matter because, it's not actionable for me. So where we come in and we talk to our colleagues in the Boston area, and we have so many of them, and they're all, there's this whole next generation sequencing and exome sequencing bandwagon, right? They're all on it. And then we sit there and we say, okay, this has to stay in academia. This cannot go out yet because it is not actionable. So we will basically force the academic researchers to think hard about how they can make it actionable. And so if they can do that in a particular rare genetic disease where it's actionable, then we'll spin that out. So we provide them sort of the filters that they are sort of blue sky people. So they kind of see things and they're big thinkers, and that's great. But we bring that prism, as you call it, which says, you know what, is this actionable? Is it now? Is it 3 years from now? Is it 30 years from now? And we'll make that sort of calculation. Thanks. Yeah?
A comment question for you. Technology is big now. All the communication part that goes on. I was most intrigued when you stated the importance of how much can be learned in a short period of time by the direct interaction. I think for young students and people that are coaching, that needs to be remembered. The text, the email, those are good things.
Right.
But the power, and I don't know, maybe you could comment a little more on that. Sometimes I think that skill is becoming less taught.
Yes.
That's key.
Yes. No, it's a very good point, Bill. So we, as you know, it's a tradition now here that either the students have to go out drinking with me and hang around me, or they're going to have lunch with me. They cannot escape me when I come here, right? That's a tradition, right? The reason I do that is exactly for that reason, and we talked about soft skills. And to George's point and to your point, and to Paul's point, communication is a two-way street, right? And so I say something, you hear something, you listen to something else, you analyze it, makes completely different things to you from me. And so that's a conversation that needs to happen. So we talked about communicating with brevity, listening to your patients, because I said your patients will give you the diagnosis themselves if you had the patience to just listen to them. Mrs. Jones, tell me what's happening, and just shut up and take notes. In about 5 minutes, she will tell you what the diagnosis is, and you'll confirm it with whatever tools you have. And so we talked about that, and we talked about exactly doing that. And the simple math on this, since all of us are geeks over here in this room, I have an IQ of about, 155, 160, I can't remember. But even if I work 24/7, 365 days a year, I would have the productivity of 1.5 people. I can simply exceed that by hiring some unknown person from front row and say, come work with me. I've already improved my output. That's the power of a team. So we are so sort of ivory tower kind of thinkers. We think that we can overthink and we can analyze and we have all the skills, and I have to go take this class and I have to take that class and I have to learn this skill and I'll be so much better because I am the octopus. I can do 8 things. No. Do one thing well. Find the other 7 people who did the other 7 things well, and you will basically get 8 people having a productivity of 64 people. So that's what it gets you. So that's what we think. We call it maximizing wages. I don't subscribe to the minimum wage rule, keep increasing the minimum wage, to think that that'll improve productivity. When you give more money to people, they perform worse. You give them less, they perform better, because you keep them hungry, So, it doesn't mean we don't pay them fairly. We give them equity all the way down. Yesterday I was telling people that even my interns have equity in my companies. Interns, 3-month interns. You guys come in, you'll get minimum wage plus equity. 3 months later, you've vested some options. Someday you'll get a check for that, 10,000, 50,000, whatever the number is at the exit price. That's what you do. You buy their vested interest. They are now invested in the success of the enterprise. By giving them equity, which is a small Trump change on the cap chart, you basically bought their heart and their mind. Money does not buy that. Aligned incentive does. So. Yes, sir. Oh, okay. Well, it's a very, very deep question, and we don't have that much time, but I'll try to answer it. So the question was, when I started, what challenges did I have, and what are the most critical challenges I have managed? Is that the question? Yeah. So when I started, what's the most critical challenge? The most critical challenge is selling the vision to the team that you're going to have come in and work with you. Not to the investors. The investor part was easy, okay? But I believe in a philosophy of recruiting the right team to retain them. So what happens is you build the right team first time around, then that company gets sold. The next time you build another company, that team comes over with you. They love you so much because they've worked with you before. You know their strengths, you know their weaknesses. When you're starting out, heart and mind paradigm is very opaque to technical people, because technical people come in and talk about their skills. And my question to them always is, what is it that you know? And they don't know how to answer that question. Like if you ask me, what is it that I know medicine. That's all I know. I know one thing, I know medicine. But you should be able to answer it that crisply. So that's a challenge, because people came, the people who wanted to come and join me, they described their skills. And their skills become irrelevant in about a day from they start, because the day they start, they're already obsolete, okay? Because that was yesterday's skills. So you have to have the people that have that self-motivation to do that. So finding that team is the biggest challenge. What's the most critical thing to manage? The hardest challenge I have faced is when my investors wanted to sell the company, I didn't want to sell the company, because we had the potential to basically be $1 billion company in 2004, and we already had 3 suitors at the table, and we had another 40 million on the table that we could take, which would be a little bit diluted because we had only raised about 25 million. And the return on that investment in 2 years' time would have been more than $1 billion. And they wanted to take the money then. It's like when you kill the golden goose, right? So it's a hard time to manage, because what they made me do is they had to asked me to lay off the people after they sold the company to another company. And they sold the very people that made the company. They made me remove the very people that made the company. That's a hard thing for me to do because those people are just as invested in me as I'm invested in them. That's my greatest challenge I have faced in life. It's a very hard thing to let a person go. You thought I was going to say money raising, right? No, never the hardest part. Anything else? Well, I've definitely baffled you with bullshit, if not dazzled you with science. Thank you very much.